Now, the one name that sums up luxury when it comes to rail travel is Pullman, named after George Mortimer Pullman, who invented these beautiful carriages and was so conceited that he insisted that everybody who waited at the table was called George, whether he was christened George or not. Now, whenever I see one of these lovely carriages, and this one was built between 1913 and 1914, it reminds me of one of those black and white American movies, always about show business. They travelled at night, the band always played and the singer always sang, and they revolved around newspapers over the wheels just to keep the plot going. Now, one of Britain's best-known singers is Barbara Dickson. I don't know whether she's going to travel by Pullman, if she's got a band, or even if she's going to sing. But like me, she's mad about railways, and she's our host on this week's Away Day.
This journey is different. It isn't often that you're greeted by a Highland piper and royal carpet when you're catching a train, but this is the Royal Scotsman.
Dan Myers, Mr. Myers from Tampa. Welcome aboard.
Departing weekly for a grand tour of the Highlands, the Royal Scotsman is the epitome of style and elegance. These carriages, carefully and lovingly restored, are reminiscent of the grand age of Victorian travel. Pity it's a diesel. We're off, and for the next few days this is going to be home, and some of my travelling companions have come a long way for this trip.
We're from Los Angeles, California. We're from the States. And
do you have any connection with Scotland at all?
No, none whatsoever. We're kind of intrigued by we were intrigued by this train trip and thought we'd come along and see Scotland from the train.
What do you think of when you think of Scotland? What does it mean to you as an American?
Well, first of all, I'd say we're rather surprised by their weather. We were thinking that it would be cold and misty and rainy, and it's quite to the contrary. It's delightful weather.
Do you think that being on a train for 6 days is going to drive you mad?
I certainly don't, and the fact that we get off every day is very important. We have been on a cruise or two, and we enjoy it only if we can get off and see the area too.
Well, do you think it's better staying on the train at night, or would you rather be in a hotel? How do you feel? I
have no problem with staying on the train. I'll have to tell you, I do like trains, and my wife likes trains, so we're maybe not the average person in that sense, but the accommodations are, first rate and look very comfortable, and we're looking forward to sleeping on the train.
This is the observation car, one of the 3 day coaches in which you can sit back and enjoy the view. Then there's the library if you want a quiet read or just to sit and write your postcards. And if you'd like to have a little snooze or just watch the day go by, there's always the rest car. At meal times you can eat in the main dining car, 2 to a table, or with a group in this rather elegant dining saloon. Or if you're a smoker, banished away into this little room to puff away at your heart's content. And at night you can lay your head down in one of these luxury twin cabins and dream about how much it's all costing you.
Prices start from £980 for a single cabin on the 3-day West Highland tour.
But for the whole thing, let's say for 6 days, the best cabin.
The best cabin, £2,820.
Is it value for money?
My guests tell me so, yes.
The train manager is John Seeger.
They're seeing some spectacular scenery in a very luxurious and sedate way, in a way in which they can travel Scotland and have a cabin here with them and eat meals while travelling through the glens and the mountains. For most people, it's the only way to see Scotland.
Taylor, the chef, does amazing things in the kitchen in very limiting conditions. This is a tiny kitchen. How do you manage to cook in here?
You get used to the space. You just have to be very, very organised and tidy all the time.
Were you trained on a train?
Not initially, no. I was trained in a kitchen that was 30, 40 times this size when I first started working.
In an hotel?
Yes.
How do you manage to shop? What do you do about shopping? Most
of our shopping's done via local suppliers as we travel around on the telephone, and they meet us at rural train stations around the route.
So what happens if the train is a couple of hours late?
Then the suppliers have to wait for us. But we've got a good understanding with them, so they wait for us or we pick it up somewhere else.
So what are you doing now?
We're putting together a little rendezvous of seafood for this evening. What I'm doing here is we've got some langoustine tails. Fresh langoustine came off the boats this morning. What we're doing is we're rolling them in some smoked bacon, and I'm going to saute them off for part of the rendezvous this evening. They're going to go together with some salmon, some turbot, some halibut, and also some scallop as well. I'm going to serve that with a little white butter sauce.
It sounds fantastic. Now, this trip isn't just about watching the scenery go by and eating. It's also educational. Highland cattle, clan feuds and Scottish nationalism are all on the syllabus.
Now here the Highland cattle, look. Now they look at the black ones. You got your cameras ready? David will try and take... Now there's the male. He's the one nearest us with the dark... See him? Yeah. See his horns come down? And their horns go up. He looks like a bison if you just look at the face. But let me tell you a wee bit about the Scots people themselves.
This is John Cowan, an ex-engineer turned guide.
Did you know that the Scots never came from this part of the country? The people who lived in this part of Britain, the northern part of the island of Britain, were in fact the Celtic tribe called the Picts and the Caledonii.
First stop is our Datton Priory, and we're about to meet a real clan chief. Colonel Campbell Preston, head of the Campbell clan. But there's not a kilt or a claymore or a scian dhu in sight.
And you can see that bit's a new bit, which was built down in 1850. And the old bit starts from where it's fairly obvious. We are just from the end of the veranda going that way. The old bit dates from 1230. And there were free...
Some of the American visitors are surprised to meet a Highland chief with an English accent.
It was a very, very strict order. They weren't allowed to speak. They had to wear hair shirts. They had to sleep in their boots. So after a bit, sort of fell off.
The tour of the house lives up to all of our expectations.
It's quite an interesting picture. It's General George Preston, who was distinguished insofar as he defended Edinburgh Castle in both the 15 and the 45. In the 45 rising, he was an old boy of 85, and he was brought back in because the then governor of Edinburgh Castle was rather suspect. They thought he was going to capitulate to Prince Charles Edward, who'd already captured Edinburgh. The chap on the white horse with his hand over his breast is George III, and his grandfather George II is in the coach behind him. And the other, it's not a coach, it's a hut sort of thing. The other hut is the timekeeper who's timing the horses. They went on the gallop.
You will notice when you go in to taste our stuff that
The Colonel's nephew Robert runs nearby Inverore Smokehouse and is very much a chip off the old block.
When do you cold smoke or hot smoke a product? How do you tell what to do? Well, honestly, that's pure tradition. For instance, you can take a salmon, and in the Middle East they love this product. You take a salmon, you don't gut it, and you put this into the hot smoke box and hot smoke the whole salmon. It's a hellish difficult product to do, actually, because you can overdo it, or you can fillet it and make it cold smoked. Similarly with a herring, you can split the herring and cold smoke it, or you can put the whole herring together, just gut it, and do a hot smoke. So it's just really what the customer wants, it doesn't matter. But you do get a totally different taste.
Time to get back on the bus and have a Scottish sing-along.
Oh, you can't shove your granny off the bus, off the bus. Oh, you can't shove your granny off the bus, off the bus. Oh, you can't shove your granny, 'cause she's your mommy's mommy. Oh, you can't shove your granny off the bus, off the bus. There we are.
At dinner, we all dress up and enjoy Anglo-American conversation.
What are you drinking?
Anything I get.
But I would think, except for this train, the really grand, gracious trains of the world are gone.
Bush is a family man. He's got a real, his wife is going to be a real asset to the administration.
They're real people.
Real down there.
And many people get a chance to meet a clan chief once in a lifetime. But as a family, they bring you right into their family.
You know, we had the war between the states, and a lot of people call it the Civil War. And that was the most ridiculous thing. The South just wanted to rise and stay there. And they're coming back. Bob, they are people that north of the Mason-Dixon line.
You acknowledge that there are people north of the Mason-Dixon.
Well, I don't speak to many of them.
They can't understand you.
You Yankees will never know.
That's a crawfish. What do they call those here in
Langoustine. Let me say a good Scottish grace. This is by Robert Burns. Some have meat and cannot eat, and some they meat that want it. But we have meat and we can eat, so let the Lord be thanked.
And after the meal, time for entertainment. At Fort William, everybody is excited because today we're going to be hauled by steam.
How old is the train? How old is the engine?
It was built and crew and came out in March 1945.
Well, 45 is a fairly recent locomotive then. I'll be darned, yeah. I thought they were all older than that. Surprised.
This was the very last one of British Railways mainline fleet to be in steam.
For goodness sakes.
1968 was the very last one to have a fire drop.
Well, I'll be darned. Yeah. You keep it in beautiful shape.
Well, we try.
Yeah. How many does British Railways have?
None.
None. This is the only one.
None. They don't own this one. This is privately owned as well.
Oh, for gosh sakes, how interesting.
I have to say I've been on this line before, but it is one of my favourites and I never tire of it. This is Mallaig, typical of many little fishing villages where the activity is only a fraction of what it used to be in its heyday. But for railway travellers, it's either a ferry to the Kyle of Lochalsh or back to Fort William. We're retracing our steps back to Glasgow, back to Diesel, on to Edinburgh and on up to Aberdeen. But first, a very important stop. This is Glamis Castle, famous for its connection with the royal family and a Shakespeare Scottish play that actors never name.
You mean Macbeth?
Yes, I do. This is the Dowager Countess of Strathmore.
Well, all history obviously is a mixture of fact and fiction, and nowhere does that seem to me more clear than this rather obscure Scottish king called Macbeth. But of course the connection with Glamis and Macbeth is entirely because of Shakespeare.
Oh, I see. So he didn't. There was no real connection with him.
Well, that I don't really know. I mean, I don't know much about the real facts about it, but who would have known or heard of Macbeth if it wasn't for Shakespeare? And it's the legendary setting for the scenes.
Macbeth, he did exist, though, didn't he? Macbeth?
Very much so. He was a king way back, and Shakespeare wrote Macbeth for King James I of England and VI of Scotland. He often visited Glamis. He made the 9th Lord Glamis, the first Earl of Kinghorn, and he went down to the court in England with him, where he would obviously have seen a lot of Shakespeare. So that was another connection. And there's also a pile of stones on a hill which is called Macbeth's Castle. So there are a lot of connections locally with Macbeth as well. But another fact is that Shakespeare visited Perth with Lawrence Fletcher, who was his partner at the Globe, and they were sent to Aberdeen to entertain King James VI of Scotland by Queen Elizabeth I. And I like to think, and a lot of other people I think agree with me, that it was very likely that Shakespeare and Lawrence Fletcher visited Glamis on the way past to get to Aberdeen.
That's right. Well, from Perth to Aberdeen they'd come very close, wouldn't they? This castle, most people know in the country, has a great connection with our present royal family. What is that? Was the Queen Mother born here?
No, she wasn't born here. She was born in the south, but her father inherited Glamis when she was 4 years old, so she spent a great deal of her childhood here, particularly in the summers. And in 1914, when she was 14, until 1918, she spent most of the time here, because Glamis was run as a convalescent home by her mother.
Really?
And the Queen Mother, in fact, as a child, helped a great deal to look after all the soldiers and all that was going on here, as well as continuing her education, of course, during those years.
Why was she here? What was she doing here when Princess Margaret was born in this castle? Because she was born here, wasn't she?
Yes, she was born here in August 1930. Well, I think they always came to Glamis in the summer, and so I suppose they didn't want to disrupt their routine. And also, perhaps it was nice to think that a royal baby would be born in Scotland after some time.
Yes, indeed. It must have been a long time since
But I think probably the main fact was that she'd had the Queen in her parents' house in London, in Bruton Street, and she was going to have her second child in their home in Scotland. I think in those days people went home probably quite a lot to have their
Yes, I think I'd rather be born in Glamis and Bruton Street in London, wouldn't you?
Well, it's a lovely place to be born, and everybody here remembers it with great joy and affection. There are still many people who tell me their memories of that day.
Is it really a magical place? It looks rather imposing.
I think it's a totally magical place. Even though I live here and come down the drive sometimes several times a day, I never fail to get a lift to my heart as I drive down, because it somehow is everything that you think a castle is, and it's steeped in history, and it's also, which is so lovely, it's still a family home, which it has been for so long. My husband's family have lived here since 1372, which is a very long time. If I may, I would love to read you some words that are at the beginning of the guidebook, which I think sum up Glamis. Can I do that?
Yes. Did you choose these?
I did. They were written by the Reverend Sturton, who wrote a history of Glamis, and I think they sum up everything that I feel about it. So long as poetry, romance, religion have a place in Scottish life and character, this castle of dim memories, of secrets and haunting shadows, crowned with the beauty and dignity of years, will win men's hearts by a mysterious fascination.
through my heart the memory called like a child. I had nearly forgotten the time when I had been by your side, but seems no one can be sure of a thing when love rushes in like the tide. I'm on a wave that carries me somewhere. I don't want to stay, I don't want to go. I'm running around. I need you to save me or let me drown. There you were like a photograph, a picture frame.
Time to get back on the coach, onto the train and head north. This is the Strathisla Distillery. A tour, I'm told, that is always very popular.
Again, it varies, you know. But on the second distillation, it will be somewhere 28, 50 over proof.
So 40% alcohol is 80 proof.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I just
Different
know.
countries have different sort of ratings for it, you know. But when it comes off the still, it's pretty potent.
Cheers. I shouldn't have put water in here, Mary.
Let's go after that 50th again. I think that's
Okay, let's do that.
There's an old Scotch expression when you drink your Scotch. It's called Lochheim. Comes from one of the lakes up here, I think.
If you listen close enough, you'll learn how to make your own whiskey when you go back. Right. But I'm going to teach you to do some Highland dancing tonight. Great. That's really good. We need all help we can get, so we'd appreciate that.
Okay, I'll follow you.
Thank you.
I think every bachelor in America ought to take this train trip. The women who work that train are wonderful. They're young, they're beautiful, and they're pleasant.
If you're going to have a party, what better place to have one than at a distillery? And the guests are certainly entering into the spirit of the occasion. As for me, it's time for bed, then time for home.
Beautiful.